Evening and welcome to the August 26th school committee meeting. This is a brief meeting just to cover a few things, but I got to read my script to start because it is an online meeting. It's time. It is 7 p.m. and I'd like to open the August 26th school committee meeting. This meeting is being held virtually through Zoom. The town of Littleton began conducting remote participation Zoom meetings pursuant to Governor Baker's emergency order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law on March 19, 2020. Since that time, unanticipated legal concerns relating to the open meeting law have been brought to our attention by the town clerk. Those concerns were supported by the Attorney General's office and confirmed by town council. One concern is that the chat function allows a parallel text conversation to a board's meeting. Chat is essentially running commentary that is occurring but is not moderated or followed by the chair. All participants and listeners may not be aware of comments being made because some meeting participants join by phone and do not see these conversations. Another concern is conversations between residents within the chat room which are not incorporated into the public record. In response to these concerns, the town will implement the following changes which in no way prohibit any member of the public from participating in discussion and sharing information during a public meeting, and will ensure that all listeners and participants have equal access to this meeting. People that join the Zoom meeting are set so their microphones are muted. If you called in by phone, please use the *6 to mute or unmute your phone. So that the meeting can occur in an orderly fashion, we ask that people who join keep their microphones on mute so background noises do not interfere with the meeting. If you wish to participate in the meeting, please use the raise your hand function available on Zoom, or if you called in by phone, dial *9, which will activate the raise your hand function. The meeting host will notify the chairperson of the raised hands, and the chairperson will determine whether and when to allow public comment. When called upon, participants should unmute, then state their name and address. After speaking, we request the participant return their microphone back to mute. Okay, so there is no oath to bills and payroll or minutes that we have to cover for this meeting. We'll deal with that at the September 9th meeting. Again, this is a brief meeting just to kind of give an update from the August 11th meeting. We stated we were going to continue to reassess the situation on the ground as things changed. And things have changed, our guidelines have changed, and so we wanted to give you an update on that. So we can start with our presentations.
Thanks, Matt. A number of things have changed since the last time that we have met. The Massachusetts Medical Society, Massachusetts Academy of Family Physicians released a joint statement calling for universal mask mandates in all schools, and a link to the press release is there as well. On August 24th, the Commissioner of Education mandated indoor universal masking in schools until at least October 1st. The Commissioner also talked about school-specific vaccination rates as a benchmark. And if other mitigation or if other benchmarks are acceptable, he would consider at that time having vaccinated individuals and students have an option of wearing masks or not. I would imagine some of the things he'd be looking at would be transmission rates, COVID cases, etc. Next slide, please. Littleton had 14 cases reported from August 1st to the 14th, a threefold increase from the 5 cases that were reported for the prior 2-week period, July 18th to 31st. Most areas we tracked trended higher this week or were flat in both average daily case rates per 100,000 and test positivity. Since then, Worcester County is now in the high zone or red zone for transmission. Middlesex County is also in the high zone or red zone for transmission. Next slide, please. When we look at the total cases in the last 7 days, CDC community transmission rates, the state as a whole is now in high transmission, while the other areas we track are in substantial transmission with the exception of Worcester and Middlesex County. A statement that I've included in the on this slide. Really, if we want to make proactive decision-making as a school committee and as a town and beyond, the orange substantial transmission rate is the time to do that. So by the time you hit the high transmission rate, it's a matter of time before you see more COVID infections in a county or in a community. Statewide cases among all age groups continue to trend higher in all age spans, inclusive of school-age students. Next slide, please. A number of clusters in the last month have been reported by DPH and childcare, K-12 schools, organized athletics, camps, restaurants, social gatherings, and households. Nothing has changed since the last time we met. Middlesex County, as I've already talked about, so we can go to the next slide. Littleton's fully vaccinated rate improved by 1% this week. It's now up to 73% fully vaccinated. As I mentioned before, the commissioner had mentioned the 80% number is a number that the Board of Education would look at in terms of one of the thresholds that needs to be met prior to having vaccinated people have a choice whether to be masked or not.
Ellie, can I just ask a quick question?
Sure.
When he says that, does he mean the staff and student population or the population for the town or the district?
It would be student and staff population at each school.
Okay.
Good question. Thank you. Center for Disease Control and the American Academy of Pediatrics have not changed their stance and recommend indoor universal masking in all schools. The Delta variant is still highly infectious. One case on average can spread to 5 to 9 people. Next slide, please. As we've heard in the past couple of weeks, the COVID vaccination efficacy is weakened over time, which isn't a surprise. CDC is currently discussing the need for booster shots 8 months after the last vaccination. The number of identified breakthrough cases is continuing to rise in Massachusetts and throughout our nation. And there's no need to look at the last slide. It just is a summary of the press release in terms of the commissioner's mandate for universal masking until at least October 1st.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Quenchy. I think, like we said, we had talked about meeting frequently to reassess things on the ground. We had made a couple of motions at our last meeting in regards to masking within the schools, which have kind of become moot at this point, given the commissioner's declaration, at least through October 1st. I think, Dr. Quenchy, do you want us to have a discussion first, or should we make a motion to rescind those motions from August 11th?
I think what we can do is typically what happens is if you're going to make a motion or rescind a motion, you have a motion made and then you have a discussion. So I can just add a comment or two. When a school committee makes motions and they pass, it's important that they can be acted upon. And in this case, the motions that were made at our last school committee meeting cannot be acted upon because the Commissioner of Education made a mask mandate until after October 1st. So it would make sense to rescind those motions.
So to follow that procedure, I'll make a motion, Matt, to rescind all motions that we passed in the August 11th meeting regarding mask mandates in the Littleton Public Schools.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded. We can discuss before
Yeah, I have a couple questions, if that's all right. I guess discussion time is the way for it. The first is I just want to note, because we've heard from a lot of folks, is that we posted this meeting to have this discussion about what the Mass Academy and others were saying, what new information was happening, was developing before we got the commissioner's kind of instructions. So we were prepared to have this conversation and to, as we've said before, to revisit our decision. Anyway, now it seems that it's taken from our hands for a little bit. I have a question for you, Kelly. I just want to clarify to make sure I understand what the commissioner's decision is. It's that everyone in schools is masked until October 1st, At which point, if districts are meeting certain criteria, only at that point can they consider lessening the mask mandate. But otherwise, if we're not at the 80% threshold, then the mask mandate from the state level endures. Is that correct?
That's right. I mean, and as I also mentioned, I would imagine that it would be prudent to include other metrics as well. I mean, the vaccination benchmark is important, but we do know that vaccinated people can catch COVID-19, and really need to also consider transmission rates, COVID rates in the community, clusters in schools, and on and on and on.
Sure. I hope that I expect that we as a committee would consider those things. I was trying to understand the commissioner's the criteria he's already laid out.
Mm-hmm. That's what we have to date.
Any other comments?
Can I ask a further clarifying question? So let's say hypothetically, October 1st comes along and we are at over 80% in, the 2 schools that's feasible in. Does that mean that we then meet and vote as a school committee on whether to make masks optional? Or does that mean, based on what the commissioner said, that masks are then optional and we don't vote and we don't control that?
We don't have that answer at this point in time. He hasn't clarified whether or not local communities will and school committees will have the opportunity to vote on that. I wouldn't want to speculate at this point in time. And again, if that does happen, I've already mentioned the other metrics. It would only apply to people who were vaccinated, and unvaccinated people would remain.
Right. Okay. We don't know. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, more information to come on that, we can assume. Justin?
Yeah, sure. I'll just add that probably many of you watched the board meeting, the board meeting. It's if you haven't seen it, I would recommend catching it on replay. It's only 22 minutes in its entirety, and it was pretty informative. The vote was I think it was 9-1 or something, but there were a few in fact, one individual that spoke. He was the one no vote, and he did raise some question about whether or not, when districts achieve 80%, whether or not it would be only those that are vaccinated would be able to unmask. And he thought, he raised some concerns about some discrimination between those that are vaccinated and unvaccinated. So I think that the message there was DESE's certainly going to be providing us more information as we get closer to October 1st. I mean, the idea here was a safe reopening for all, which I think obviously we can all support based upon the numbers. So they've taken that out of our hands, which is perfectly fine. But I would suspect that as the weeks go on, we're going to get more and more information, and it'll become more clear to us. To speculate on what's going to happen October 1st is probably a waste of time, because they're going to continue to likely update us as we go. But my message was, if you didn't tune in, it's 22 minutes. It was very informative, and I would encourage the panelists as well as all of the viewers tonight to take a look at it.
Thanks, Justin. I'm glad you mentioned that, because the Board of Health can also play a role. And I mean, we all know that in order to utilize or implement effective mitigation strategies, it has to go beyond the school level. And I guess the question is, at what point in time, what are the benchmarks, what are the thresholds for those mitigation strategies? We did form a COVID-19 working group with the town, Board of Health chair, select board chair, town administrator, school committee chair, fire chief, police chief, and our PPS director and our director of teaching and learning. We had one meeting, and we talked about the need to take a look at certain benchmarks. I personally would be very concerned if we reach the high transmission zone, the red zone, and also be in the red zone for the number of COVID cases. That would be hinging on reactivity rather than proactivity. And we can't do all of this by ourselves in schools. I mean, we know that kids are out and about, our families are out in other places beyond Littleton. And any mitigation strategy we can have when those certain thresholds are met are going to be beneficial to keeping everybody as safe as possible in our community. So I'm thrilled that we have this group together, because we can talk about beyond what we're doing in the school. And there may come a time in a very short period of time where you'll see something else happen within our community in terms of mitigation strategies.
I think we saw today, even from that group, that we had the vaccination van. I believe wasn't that a third Thursday today?
That's right. Yeah, the van was here today.
That was what we got from the meeting. So, one of the key things to getting some change, I think, and what we're getting at is increasing vaccination rates throughout the community, not just within the school. And we do have some really odd statistics there. The over 75 one to me is a little strange, but that it's lower than some of the others. But so I think just getting some public outreach and encouraging people to learn more about the vaccination process, those who are still hesitant to get it, and through education, we can hopefully get more people vaccinated.
Matt, I'd just like to note that I think Kelly may have invented a word for us, mitigation, which combines mitigation and the Swiss cheese metaphor. I think we should really go with. I'm not going to make a motion, but I just hope we can use that in the future.
I did not realize I added an R to that word.
So it's superlative, it's cheese, it works. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Kelly, I did have a question about our efforts in looking to collect the vaccination data. I was going to bring it up later in the meeting, but it seems like now would be appropriate. It's obviously going to be important. Like prior to the mandate, it seemed like, well, we were only going to ask for vaccination status if you wanted to take your mask off, because Jesse has mandated this and it's tied to a metrics of vaccination within the building. What are our efforts going to look like to collect vaccination data from students and staff? I think we're going to need to make that sort of a mandatory thing that folks are going to have to kind of let us know.
It's imperative that we collect that information. I'm not going to use the word mandatory, but we're going to strongly encourage our staff and students, parents to provide that information to us. We have a tracking system already in place, and we'll be sending out a letter next week indicating that after we start school, there'll be a week or a week and a half period where we would like proof of vaccination to be brought in so that we can track it, and that way we will know exactly where we're at from month to month or day to day.
Okay, thank you.
Timlin, do you have any thoughts before we move to?
No, I'm all set. Everybody covered everything. Thank you.
All right. I think, like I said, this is something we were kind of going to be discussing anyway, just to see, because we have seen a change in the numbers in the town since the August 11th meeting. And our numbers that we saw were from that January 31st, I think. So we had that 5 number, and then we did see an increase. So we were certainly going to have another robust discussion on whether this change had to be made in the first place. Now that the commissioner has taken that out of our hands, I guess my only question is really for the principals is with the cafeteria now. I know that some of my kids have gotten letters talking about having lunches again in the gym or they might be in the gym, they may be in the cafeteria. Are we still splitting all lunches where kids are unmasked to provide enough distance?
We're doing what we need to. I would defer to the principals. We actually had a conversation about that today, so I would rather have them tell you exactly what they're doing, just in case I wasn't as exact as they portrayed today. Okay. Maybe start with Shaker Lane.
Sure, Michelle.
Yeah, happy to. So where we are striving to reach the 3 feet of distance, that is what we have currently in the cafeteria. So we have table trays, as many desks as we can, because we have more students coming back this year. We do need the desks. So Steve Mark has purchased these TV trays, like when you have TV in your when you have dinner in your TV room. So you have those trays. We have a few desks left over. So we have set them up in rows facing forward, 3 feet apart. They will be numbered. Students will be sitting in assigned seats for contact tracing. Our lunch periods are 20 minutes long. However, these kids are usually done eating in like 10 to 15 minutes. And just like last year, as soon as they're done eating lunch, their masks go back on. When they get up and travel, we are going to ask them to use their masks. So similar protocols in the cafeteria, just the distance is now going to be 3 feet so we can manage lunches a little bit more appropriately. We're going back to 3 lunches where we had 6 lunches last year. The coverage was difficult. We have more students returning this year. More staff will be needed to cover in different areas. So that is our plan at Shaker Lane.
And so there's no round tables. Everyone's just facing. Okay.
Correct. We just, as Cheryl and I were talking about this and the other principals, we felt that right now for our little ones, especially where they are unvaccinated, that we wanted them to be as safe as possible that we could promote for them.
Cheryl?
Thanks, Michelle. My plan at Russell Street is similar to Michelle's plan at Shaker Lane. We generally have round tables, so we're using rows of chairs in the cafeteria. Our plan, however, is to be outside as we were last year, as many days as the weather permits in the fall. If we have inclement weather, we'll use the cafeteria, but similar to Michelle, we'll have a seating, so students will come in, they'll have an assigned seat, so we'll be able to do contact tracing if necessary. We purchased, with Steve Mark's help, some additional of the heavy plastic section trays. We're going to serve lunches directly onto the tray as we did pre-COVID, and students will be able to just use that heavy plastic tray in their lap. As we did last year, we didn't have trays or desks last year. We just used the cardboard containers in laps last year. So I think the plastic's even sturdier. So we should be all set.
Jason?
Yeah, and at the middle school, it'll be just like last year with the desks or with the chairs in rows. Our cafeteria just isn't big enough to hold 135 kids at 3 feet apart. We couldn't go to the rounds. There was no way to safely keep kids 3 feet apart. So it'll be just like last year. Like the others said, we've had to move many of the desks out into the classrooms with the full return, but we do have the TV trays. So we'll have half the kids in the cafeteria. We'll have half the kids in the gym, and then hopefully as the year goes on, we can bring everybody back together. And if not, maybe we can work it out. But the same thing. The kids are usually done in the first 10 or 15 minutes, and then we'll let them go outside and kind of run around a little bit, get some fresh air, for a bit of a mask break. But yeah, we intend to split the lunches just like last year.
Okay. My only question for you, Jason, now, if this drags on, I know that some kids, I think I read that it was based on their flex blocks. They would be assigned. Are we going to switch them up at all so that some kids have access to the caf and they're not stuck in the gym
Yeah, I'd like to. Let's assume that this is the way, worst case scenario, that this is the way it's going to be for the year. We could look at reasonably having a January switch when we come back. Last year we put out a Google form and let kids choose the location they wanted to be. So if they wanted to coordinate with friends, the problem is over the summer, there was just no way we were going to be able to get that kind of information back for us to be able to do that. So that's why we're going to do it by flex block to start. So at some point in time, we can either open it up to student choice or, like you said, flip flop the location so everybody has a chance to experience both.
Great. And lastly, John.
Hi, everyone. Yes, we have 3 lunches as we typically would. Similar to the other folks, we're using some spaces that we used last year, though we are not using the gym this year with desks or tray tables. We have, I think at this point, earmarked the tray tables for other areas, for other schools. If we need them, I think there's enough around for additional seating. We have an additional area outside. I guess it's sort of a cafeteria annex outside the auditorium. We used it last year. Popular with a lot of kids. They really enjoyed being near the balcony area. Lots of natural light coming in there through the windows. So that became a preferred spot for different groups of friends. We also will have a tent this year right on our front lawn there by the flagpole. That was very popular. We have the patio area already, established of course, pre-COVID with the building. And that will be available for students. A lot of students just preferred to go outside right away. It wasn't something like they ate inside and then went out. They started right outside and they preferred that. They also used the flower bed areas, those areas along the driveway. They sat along there. That became quite popular. We also opened up spaces on the grass field. Kids could go across the parking lot and sit out on the field. So that's something we'll continue to allow. We want to have as much outside. I think Cheryl brought this up earlier, that having the students, weather permitting, eat outside as much as possible, just to make use of the outdoors and you get some fresh air. The cafeteria tables are traditional round tables. We are not using tray tables or desks, like I mentioned. We are using the round tables with either plexiglass dividers or those you might have seen them, cardboard dividers with a plastic sheeting. You can see through it, so students can see their friends while they eat lunch, but there will be a divider there. So we will be resuming our use of the round tables. I think most of the students will prefer to continue to eat outside. It was limited even last year with all the spacing. I think with the round tables, though, coming back, that might allow students to congregate a little closer together, enjoy that space, and have more time with friends inside. The indoor area was not really popular. They sort of would twist, the tray tables were supposed to be facing one way only, and the kids would twist them around and face each other, especially towards June. And we had to keep reminding them of that. So that's our plan for this year.
Great. The only other thing I would say, given the masks mandate is, I would strongly encourage the principals to talk to teachers about using good judgment when kids need a mask break. Not just, I know being a teacher myself, you get stuck on a lesson and you want to continue, but if you see a kid who's struggling, get them, make sure they know that these kids may need a break. They may need to go take a walk, and especially in the beginning of September when the temperatures are going to be higher in the school year. That's my only concern, but I think it sounds like you guys got it well under control. All right.
Just had a question about close contacts and lunch. If maybe Kelly or Lynn, like DESE close contact definition experts, the strategies that we've got in place, like DESE rolled out major updates for the definitions of close contacts. So unmasked while eating, if you're greater than 3 feet, you're not identified as a close contact, correct?
Right. So Michelle kind of highlighted that piece is that it's really the cumulative 15 minutes to the duration over the 24 hours. So as long as we're mindful of that and the students are spaced out, we'll really be able to avoid a close contact situation.
Okay. And while we're on the topic of close contact, so another reason I think for gathering vaccination information pretty quickly in the school year is if I read it correctly and understood it correctly, if you're a vaccinated individual and asymptomatic, even if you are a close contact, you are not subject to quarantine.
Exempt from testing and quarantine response protocols, yes.
Okay.
And I think the intention behind that is really wanting to keep our teachers who are vaccinated in the classrooms as much as possible.
And the students, I would think too, as well.
Sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Kelly, is that going to be on the letter going out as a benefit to students and staff disclosing their vaccination status if they are? It certainly is a benefit that if you happen to come in close contact, but you are asymptomatic and vaccinated, you would not be subject to quarantine or testing.
That's right. And we will include that in the letter.
Thank you.
No one else has any more comments? I think we can finally make a vote on Brad's motion to rescind the motions from our August 11th meeting in regards to mask mandates. This is a roll call vote. I'll start with Timlin.
Timlin Rassius, yes.
Justin.
Justin McCarthy, yes.
Jen.
Jen Gold, yes.
Brad.
Brad Austin, yes.
Matt Hunt votes yes as well. So that brings us to an update on the pool testing by Lynn.
Sure. Yep. Pool testing 21-22. It's going to be a little bit different this year. There's some exciting changes to the pool testing, which is now referred to as COVID safety checks. The program will include symptomatic testing, which we did last year,
as well as the routine weekly pool testing with the lab-based follow-up, which is an exciting change to the program. We'll be doing a double nasal swab collection. So then if we have a positive pool, the lab will immediately test that pool. The lab will immediately test all of the members of the pool to determine what members were positive so that we can respond very efficiently. And then we'll also be able to do the test and stay protocol. And so for students who are positive, we'll be able to test them daily with Binax Now. The other exciting change is that we're going to have a lot of support from CIC and the subcontracted support staff. So we have a district level program coordinator who is going to assist with the logistics. We're going to have on-site staff who are going to be assisting with the collections. We're going to have they are going to be also managing the consents as well. So they'll be providing the technical assistance, and we'll still be also receiving the support with the transportation of all of the pool testing collections to the Broad Institute.
Great. Brad, looks like you got a question?
Yeah, I do. That sounds great, Lynn. I especially like the idea that they can do a targeted test if a pool comes back positive. So, but I want to understand the kind of implications for the district beyond the testing protocol itself. Does this mean it's going to free up some staff time that we were having to dedicate last year to transporting and doing all this stuff? Are we getting outside support to?
We are getting outside support, which is going to be very helpful. So there is definitely going to be some to get it off the ground, logistical time that the staff and the nurses will really be helping to aid our program coordinator, meeting with the nurses on Monday to kind of go through some of those details, which is great. I've already had a couple meetings with our program coordinator for the district. She was a program coordinator for the testing program in a much larger district last year, so this is familiar to her, which is good.
That person is an outside person who is paid by someone else?
Desi.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yep. One important detail to keep in mind is that when we are collecting the consents, you're consenting for the whole program. So you're consenting for your child to be tested if they are symptomatic, pool testing, the weekly checks, as well as the test and stay protocol.
Lynn, what's the timing on that? Are we day one? When are we going to run our first pool testing? Honest question. Just when do you think you're going to get started?
Yep, we've talked a little bit about that with the principals. They're kind of thinking about what is realistic to expect. We have the letter and the consent ready to push out. So I expect that that's going to go out on the first day. We obviously want to get as many people participating as possible. So I don't have an exact start date, but I'm thinking that we want to be starting as soon as possible, as soon as we can, close to the beginning of the school year. So likely week 2 or week 3.
Okay. And there have been some great improvements with it. That's awesome to hear. That test and stay obviously is a terrific new feature where we can keep asymptomatic people in school in person. And it's was it 5 or 7 days of testing?
Desi's going to be providing some clarification. So because they say at least 5, but of course, if it's over the weekend, they're going to be expected to quarantine on the Saturday and Sunday because we won't be opening the Binax Now testing center on Saturdays and Sundays at this point. So it might go into like if a student tests positive, we're going to test them Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. They'll quarantine on Saturday and Sunday. They'll be tested again on Monday. So that's why it's that. Is it 5 days or is it 7 days?
And so the consent is for all testing. So if someone wants to participate in the test and stay, therefore they have to be in the pool testing?
They do. It's not an a la carte option. They're consenting to participate in the COVID safety checks program, which includes symptomatic testing, test and stay, as well as the weekly COVID safety checks, which is what was rebranded and used to be your pool testing, the nasal swab.
Okay, so if someone's not if someone has not consented and they're not participating and they are identified as a close contact, unfortunately, that individual would need to be removed from the population. They would need to quarantine.
Yep, they need to follow the protocols as outlined by DESE.
Okay. So there are bigger, much larger benefits to participating this year. That's great.
Yep.
Yay. Any other questions?
I think Timolyn raised her hand.
Timlin?
I did, and then I hit the wrong button and shut my video off. I'm sorry. Lynn, when you say, so if they're not in the pool testing, if they don't consent in, and they do become a close contact in their home, do we know, this may even be a question for Kelly, are we allowed to have them videoing in from home?
Mm-mm.
No.
No, so it will be, DESE has been kind of clear about that just like if it was, what they specifically said was it would be similar to chicken pox or the flu. They would be treated as days of absence. But what we can do, they were specifically discussing the students who were testing positive, or even like asymptomatic students who are testing positive. But what we really want to do is make sure that we're still continuing to keep learning alive. Teachers can send work home, but at this point, we wouldn't be having students live streaming in.
Okay, thank you.
Any other? Brad, one more?
Note that this seems like a really effective mitigation tool. Trying to get the word used.
Good job, Brad. It's going to catch on. Okay. Lynn, I appreciate the update. All sounds great. At this point, I think that concludes our 2 meeting agenda items. We can open it up to any interested citizens.
We do have one question already.
Okay.
Rebecca Lewis, please state your name, your street, and your question, please.
Rebecca Lewis, 166 Harvard Road. I actually have a few questions. I think that the board really does need to anticipate that this will be our situation for the entire year. We're in the position we're in because people have not been following the measures that we know will keep people safe. They aren't wearing masks in groups. We know that part of Schcmte got shut down because of this. And the Board of Health was not even informed of that, which we learned last night at the Board of Health meeting. So I do suggest that the school committee also have some connections with the Board of Health who are following the data about what is going to protect our students, particularly the most vulnerable among our students. We know we have students that are in the school who are undergoing various therapies that make them even more susceptible to this virus. And in fact, there's been some studies that have come out very recently that show that putting up barriers between people cuts down some of the airflow and is actually worse than increasing ventilation in schools and in other closed buildings. So I really do suggest that before some of these measures are taken in the schools, that you consult with someone who has that knowledge, particularly if there's not going to be testing and quarantining of asymptomatic vaccinated people, because they can be shedding virus. So a few things I just wanted to mention. And my question is really, if we aren't having, if we get to the point where there is, students are allowed, if they say if they say they are vaccinated, if they are allowed to not wear masks, who is going to be responsible for enforcing that? Are we putting that burden on teachers that they have to know, particularly at the middle and high school, which is where that would be the case at this point, that they have to know the vaccine status of any student who is not wearing a mask in their classroom?
Kelly, you want to field that?
Sure. I'm trying to tease out what the questions and what the comments were, so I'll do my best.
Well, the question is about who is going to be enforcing what the vaccine status is of people who are not wearing masks. Is that
All right, thank you. I mean, as we all know, it will be a bit of a challenge, but we do have a database that we've created that will allow every teacher to go into that particular class and pull up a name, and we will have a status on that student, whether they're vaccinated or not. We would also like to think that and our kids have been really good about this, our students have been good about this, that they would follow the expectations that we set, but we certainly have a mechanism to check.
I would also point out, Kelly, is that at the minimum, we've got a little bit until we have to figure out if there are bugs in the plan you're describing. We have until October 1st, so we could even consider making that decision. I'm not sure this committee would make the decision anyway, and I'm not sure, and the town may not be there in the first place. So Rebecca's question is a very good one. How to make whatever decision we make operational is something we always have to consider. But we have some time to figure it out, and maybe to hear from other folks and to see what best practices are. That's not something the teachers have to be worried about for the first 4 weeks of school.
That's right, and that's a real good thing. It allows our staff to get back into the schools and focus on instruction. And we had a conversation at our last school committee meeting about the importance of getting back to as much normal as we can, even though we're still within a pandemic.
I would also just note, I'm sorry, from the teacher standpoint, we're looking at a student population that's 75, 80% vaccinated, then in each individual class, you may have as few as 1, 2, 3 people who are not vaccinated. Our teachers are responsible for administering IEPs all the time, where they know the 3 students that need certain accommodations or they have to pay attention to. It's something, it would be an additional thing. I think Rebecca's exactly right there, but it's the kind of thing teachers have on their mind throughout any instructional period.
Lynn, you had a question or a comment?
Well, I was just going to say, actually, similar to what Brad said, we have already had meetings with our Aspen programmers, so we already have it built into our health forms to document the vaccine, to document the date of the first dose, the second dose, or if it's a single dose. And we've already had a meeting to do the programming so that once it's 14 days past that second dose, to push that alert to the first page, so that it's going to be really easy for the staff to see that status when and if we need to do that. And just like Brad said, it would be so few. We do similar things like that for students that have peanut allergies. We have a health alert or different types of alerts on those pages, and it's definitely something that the staff are used to checking for that information. And our hope is that once we get to that 80%, that number is going to be very small.
Thanks, Mark.
Matt, I just had a follow-up comment on the plastic partitions that the caller just referenced. So I think many of us are sort of familiar with the study where basically they found that if you have plastic partitions and they're essentially making the airflow stagnant, what can happen over time is that air can actually become dirty or infected with COVID and can actually cause problems. But I believe what Dr. Harrington was describing was more of like a sneeze guard effect, where it's if you're at the table and you did have a person that was symptomatic or was able to shed the disease and they sneezed, that they wouldn't, or expelled a lot of virus, that it would hit these partitions and wouldn't necessarily cause a massive close contact event. It's not the type of situation where it's going to be sort of restricting airflow, because it's going to be wide open, I would think, up top and or back by the person. So I do think that we've thought through many of these things, and all of us are well aware of best practices at this point. And I attended the Board of Health meeting. We're all following the data very, very closely. We've all pledged to get back to the table as often as needed and pivot and make as many changes as possible. So thank you for your comments.
Next question.
Yep.
Matthew Ridge, please state your name, your street, and your question, please.
Yes, Matthew Ridge, 325 Great Road. That study that was just stated, I know which one you're talking about, and 2 things about it. One, the study itself said that it did not take into consideration airflow. It just took into consideration that what it would do to particulates that were outside of the sneeze area. In other words, if somebody sneezed, what would happen to it? They never considered airflow, people walking around, or even behind them. That is a big issue in general, because if we have maximized the airflow for these rooms in general, we are looking at a situation where even though a person sneezes and is stopped by this barrier, it has nowhere to go but either up or back. Because as last year we were told that the rooms have significant enough airflow where it is going to be moving enough air around, winter or summer, spring, fall, doesn't matter. So that's one big issue. Second of all, being in IT, you guys are creating a database. Who's controlling this database? What security is at this database? And how do we know that it's protected? Because honestly, I don't need my son's information getting out. This is a problem that needs to be answered really quick if we're going to be forced to be putting our information, personal information, especially medical information, into this. Thirdly, for me, there is a such thing. I take it everybody here has heard of meth mouth, right? Yes. There is a new medical diagnosis that children, especially of the ages from tooth-bearing age to teenagers, have been showing something called mask mouth. Same concept. The bacteria in your mouth actually ends up rotting your mouth, especially the dental work, teeth and gums and things like that. This needs to be looked at. We already know that children are already having reactions to masks when it comes to wearing them for long periods of time. Even if they are outside maskless for 20, 30 minutes, it's still not a guarantee that you are going to have a child that is not going to be interacting or having a mask that is filled with sweat and things like that. Yes, we can actually give our child more than one mask, which I will be doing, but it comes down to the point where masks themselves, and there have been studies about this, do not protect against the COVID. It stops it, but it does not protect. Masks are for all intended purposes, a security blanket. We need to make sure people wash their hands and things like that. We can't assume that masks are going to be the defining factor that's going to keep everybody safe, nor can we say that keeping people 3 feet apart in a partition is going to keep somebody safe. Children are children. We need that. My son now has an issue speaking. We have been working all summer getting him back to where he should be. The teachers need to show their mouths. Teachers need to show that they're smiling, that they're frowning, that they're enunciating, things like that. We need the teachers back to where they were. We cannot have fear, for all intended purposes, running this. If you are going to say that somebody who's asymptomatic, has had their shot, can still be in class, okay, what about the children who can't get it? They're going to be forced to wear a mask. We need to come up with something for the children, because my son is repeating kindergarten again because of last year. We are going to go through transitional. I have no issue with that. But if he has to repeat it one more time, I have an issue with that. We need to make it so our children are learning correctly. We need to be able to have our teachers teach properly. Speech, English, things like that. They need to be able to see the child. They need to be able to see the teacher's mouths, and vice versa. My child speaks with an accent. Don't know where he got it from. It wasn't from me. It wasn't from school. He's speaking with an accent now. And this, we've been breaking him of that habit, but it's not going to work if the teachers can't interact closely with the students. Being 3 feet apart will not work. Ultimately, we need to find something that is going to work. And my child's safety is important, but so is my child's education. And right now, as we are looking with masks off and everything else, we are seeing 800 children from the ages from 0 to 5 within the last week that have COVID, no deaths, no issues, asymptomatic, 99% of them. Yes, there are children out there that have significant secondary issues that are causing issues, but we need to we cannot sacrifice the many just because of a handful of people. And I'm sorry to say this, but this is one of these things where I'm going to be hard set on, because the majority of this town, our children deserve better than what we're getting right now. The studies that have been done by the CDC and everything else, I have gone through them. And the majority of those studies aren't even in the United States. There was one that was inside the United States. And right now that study was between 2 people. And they were the top study for the CDC showing that COVID is bad is 2 people who were hair salon stylists and how they affected 136 people. All the others were self-reported studies. They are not official studies. We need better data. And if we're going to be using the school as if we are going to use this school as a blueprint of what to do, we need to make sure that our children are not only safe, but they are learning correctly. And right now, I'm afraid that if we have another year of masks with our children, they are not going to learn correctly. Because I'm already spending a few hours a day with my son learning what should be taught at school. And I don't mind doing it, but we already, that's what school is for. And I honestly want our child to learn properly from an educator, not their parents. We are there to help. We are here to reinforce what they learn at school. We are not there meant to be teaching our children. If we're going to be teaching, we might as well just teach them at home. Now, I don't want to do that. My wife can't do that. She can't spend another year at home. I can't spend time at home. We need to get this all under, and we need to make decisions for ourselves. We can't depend on the government to make our decisions. You are the school committee. Please make the decisions. Don't depend on somebody else higher up who is not in our vicinity. They do not know us. They do not care about us. They just worry about being reelected. Let's worry about us, not somebody else that's high up on the mountaintop. I want our schools to be a place for education, not fear. And that's what I'm afraid this year is going to be again. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thanks. Brad, go ahead.
Yeah, there's a lot there. I want to respond or focus on one thing in particular, and maybe get some clarification from our principals. One thing Matthew, I believe, was talking about is the importance of being able to see a teacher's face. You know, I as I've mentioned before, I have a deaf daughter, and the lip reading is very important for her. I wonder if the principals can comment on whether or not teachers have access to clear mask, and if not, can we provide them if they desire them, or if they think will be helpful for them?
Brad, we can start with Lynn. I mean, Lynn has that information as well.
Yes, we've provided clear masks to all of the teachers and staff who have asked, and we can continue to do that. It's been helpful to foreign language teachers, our ELL teachers, many of our gen ed teachers, and our teachers at Shaker Lane and Russell Street throughout the district have used them as a very helpful tool. Our teachers who are teaching phonics lessons, they've been really beneficial.
I thought that was true. I just wanted to clarify. Thank you very much.
May I also just add that when the mask mandate outside was lifted, the staff were outside without masks, so they're able to see their teacher's face. When they have snack, the teachers are present. They're having snack last year. They were 6 feet away, so they are able to see them, not to the extent if they were masked in the classroom. So there were those opportunities several times throughout the year, and even more so at the end of the year when the mask mandate was lifted outside at recess.
Thank you.
And also on Wednesdays when we were virtual. So we also had that wonderful opportunity to, granted it was on the screen, but they were able to see the teachers without masks.
All right, next question.
Question. Meera Gill, please state your name, your street, and your question, please.
This is Solomon Marini, 149 Hartwell Avenue. I guess my concern was around treating the students who are quarantining or isolating as sort of routine, like chickenpox or other things. As you know, if the numbers continue to go the way we're going, we're going to see a lot of students missing time, and I'd like to see some thought given to how to support those kids. More than we would in a normal year, particularly if those numbers grow.
I can speak to that. I mean, certainly it's a fluid situation that we would be addressing all the way. The guidance is currently right now how we would handle it, but especially if we were faced with an outbreak or a large number of cases or something where we needed to pivot, we've definitely found our way through that as well.
We are very fortunate that we do have the skill sets to pivot if we need to, but at this point in time, we're following the directives given to us by the Commissioner of Education. I'm sure if we're in a situation, or the state ends up in a situation where we have a increase in absenteeism due to COVID-19, I would anticipate that there would be some changes made as well.
Can I just add, I appreciate those responses, but I think I had the same reaction Saul did, is that, one thing that we've learned over the last, 14 months is that we had to rethink a lot of our operations. And so maybe the answer will eventually be we treat chickenpox and other things like we treated COVID, and that maybe there becomes a way for us to kind of modify operations. We've already talked about how our experience last year kind of made us move a little more quickly on switch to project-based learning or to different block schedules. As we continue to learn lessons about what we're able to do in challenging situations, maybe will be a chance for us, not now, maybe not this year, but to, as a district, to think about how we accommodate students who have to miss school for extended periods of time.
Thanks, Brad. Next question.
Next question. Eileen, please state your full name, your street, and your question, please.
Hi, it's Eileen Wiedegartner on Maplehurst Road. I had 3 questions in total, and the first one I would want to direct specifically at the middle school, namely because of that 80% mark. You're not going to hit it at Shaker Lane, and you could definitely hit it at the high school. But is there, given what the commissioner had put out about hitting 80% of vaccination at the school, is that even feasible in the middle school throughout the year?
I can certainly answer that. Thank you, Eileen. Until the vaccination is available to students in grade 6 under 12, it would be highly unlikely that we would reach an 80% vaccination rate.
Okay, that was a point of clarification for me. Thank you for answering that, Dr. Flinchey. My next question would have to do, and this I may have misunderstood listening to, but in the test and stay program, if students are close contacts and they don't show symptoms and they do not have to test, but if they're participating in the weekly testing and they show up positive, would any student who shows up positive then be expected to quarantine?
Eileen, can you just ask that question again?
Yeah, sure. It's a little confusing. So I heard in the meeting someone say that in the test and stay thing, if someone is a close contact, they don't have to test so long as they remain asymptomatic. But if you, in the pooled testing that we do, if students do show up positive, even if they're asymptomatic, would they be expected to quarantine?
Oh, so it's an asymptomatic close contact.
No, an asymptomatic positive test.
An asymptomatic positive test. I have that right here. I think it's like protocol C3 or something like that. There's multiple protocols, and our all of our family handbooks are going to be updated, so you'll have this information. It is also available on the DESE website. So you're asking if it is an asymptomatic positive. So for an asymptomatic positive, hold on. So the protocol for asymptomatic close contacts who are not exempt from testing and quarantine response protocols, is that what you're asking?
I guess one of the things that I was hearing that concerned me is that people said if they were close contact.
Eileen, we're not hearing you. Eileen, you want to hang up and call back?
I think I understand your question. And I think it had to do with my comment earlier, which is if you are a vaccinated close contact but asymptomatic, you're exempt from quarantine.
Mm-hmm.
She was asking if you were in a pooled testing and you were identified as a positive case. So you have a positive case. That person, of course, would be subject to quarantine because they have tested positive.
Yeah,
that was the question.
Okay, well, okay. I worry about people not having to test, but I'm not going to go there because that's not what the rules say. My last question would be, and I don't know if there are rules around this, I'm just asking, is there a way to tie that not wearing a mask eventually at some point, if that happens, to being a member of the pooled testing? Because I feel like those numbers weren't as great as they could have been last year. And I'd love to see more families given incentive to participate in that.
I think I know the answer to that, Kelly, but I'll let you handle it.
Yeah, I mean, we could consider that. I think at this point in time, we need to see what our numbers are for pool testing and look at that data. And also, it's uncertain as to how much of the decision making will be left up to us as opposed to whether it will be the Commissioner of Education making those decisions.
Okay, well, thank you for considering my questions.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Eileen.
Any more questions, Dorothy?
No more questions.
Matthew, I had one more question that related to something. It reminded me that Matt Ridge had asked earlier, please. No, he had asked something about security and privacy of student information. I assume we already have protocols. We protect a lot of student information.
Yes, I kind of alluded to that earlier. So that's why our teachers do not have access to the health form section of our Aspen portal, so they're not able to access any protected health information. What we would have would be providing them access to the information that they need to be able to operationally ensure the order of the school, which would be just a simple vaccination status. They wouldn't have any information as far as which vaccine, what the dates were, when it happened, when any of that.
And we do have safety protocols in place.
And everything, all of our platforms are multi-factor authentication. You're not able to access without a login. All of it's tracked and controlled.
Thank you. I assumed that was the case, but I thought we needed to make it clear. Thank you.
Okay, Dorothy, looks like we have one more question. If you want to just grab John Kay, and then we'll cut it off.
John Kay, please state your full name, your street, and your question, please.
Yeah, it's John Kurzwick, 171 Hartwell. So I had kind of a follow-on question there about vaccination status. So with the recent reports here about neutralizing antibodies only lasting 6 months, are we going to be talking about people who may have gotten 2 shots, but it's 6 months out now and they're not vaccinated anymore? Somebody want to speak to that?
I can certainly try to answer that, John. I mean, at this point in time, we're really relying on the experts to determine efficacy rates of vaccines, et cetera. So we're not the experts in this area. We're relying on medical experts, not only in Massachusetts, but within our nation. So CDC, et cetera. So time will tell. I mean, that this is a fairly new announcement that we've heard about in the last 2 weeks, and they've already started talking about a third dose, not a booster shot. They're calling it a dose for immunocompromised individuals.
I think, Dr. Clenchey, that given so much of the unknowns right now, I think it's just important to note that we are flexible and we do take a lot of these things into consideration. And if it's left up to us, if it's given us, if we're able to make these decisions, it's certainly something we're going to consider. Whether a booster shot is needed, it's something that we will address when the time comes. Any other questions?
Thank you, John. No more questions.
Okay, at this point, I will take a motion to adjourn until our first regular meeting, September 9th.
I'll move to adjourn, and I also just want to wish all the principals and staff good luck the next week getting ready. Everybody's excited about this, so thanks for all your hard work. A motion to adjourn.
I will second the motion and the words of encouragement. Good luck.
Thank you. All right, this is a roll call vote. Jen?
And vote yes, and good luck next week to everybody. Thank you, guys.
Timlin?
Timlin Rassius, yes.
Justin?
Justin McCarthy, yes.
Brad?
Austin, yes.
Matt Hunt votes yes as well. Again, good luck to all our students and staff, and hopefully we have a great 2021-2022 school year. I think we got a lot of great things on the horizon and look forward to getting into the business of school, not just worrying about COVID measures. All right. Everyone have a great night. Enjoy the last gasps of summer.